Thank you very much. So as we told you, we've held a survey, especially for this conference. It was held between July 10th and 13th, together with iPanel, and we've interviewed 805 people who are a representative sample of the Israeli population. And let's see what are the main insights that we can present regarding what people think about conscription to IDF. So first of all, we've asked if there is a law passed that exempts most of the Haredi men from conscription, how will that affect for specifically parents to children at ages that are almost conscription ages, so 15 to 18-year-olds. So what we see here from the beginning, that would help. What we see here is that compared to before the war, we see a certain decrease in the amount of people saying it will influence, but we would expect that while we are battling for our state, the decrease will be even more significant. And when we ask only the people who said whether it will influence, what we see is that there are indeed more people encouraging their kids to conscribe, to enlist, but most of it to national service. And when we're looking at the overall sample of the population, we see that a very great majority in the Israeli society thinks that passing a law that will exempt most Haredi men from the IDF will bring decrease of motivation for battle service. And you can see that the more the discussions over the law have been more and more advanced in September till this day, we see more and more people feeling that way. The more the war continues, and as we've heard quite a lot, the burden for the people in service is growing. The more we see people being frustrated and feeling that if one part of the population is exempted from IDF service, it will influence motivation of other populations to enlist. Next thing we've tried to look at is the way people's conception about mandatory conscription influences the way women think about people think of mandatory conscription to service, and we see that most people think that this is not the right thing to cancel the mandatory service, but a lot of people do think that it's time to cancel the mandatory service. But looking at the demographic shares, we see that 40% of the non-Orthodox populations think it's time to cancel it. When looking at the question what people would like to see happening, we see a great majority who wants people to serve, where we see a different division when it comes to different emphases. Some people think that everyone should be mandatory enlisted, and almost 40%, 32.5%, think that mandatory conscription should be for Jews according to the needs of the IDF, whether it's as public service or military service, or just conscription law only for Jews. It's also important to mention that the whole question of Haredi service has to do with the whole society. And one of the questions that we always look at in our researches in the INSS is the influence of these discussions over the question of the trust of the IDF. And when looking specifically how much people are willing to believe the IDF's reports regarding Haredi and conscription, we see that about half of the Israeli public has a great trust of IDF reports regarding the volume of the draft orders issued. So even when IDF says what they're about to do, people don't necessarily believe the IDF. And we see a trend of improvement regarding that issue compared to May when we asked that. But the fact that the rates of trust is so low is quite a signal of warning for the IDF in regards to the way the public sees it. And if we don't believe the army regarding certain questions, what does it mean for our overall trust of the IDF? Now I want you to look at two very specific data that are very concerning and are part of what is supposed to motivate us into action. At the end of the day, for years, the IDF was seen as the military of the people. Maybe one of the greatest cliches we have, that IDF is the military of the nation, of the people. But when we ask people if this model is in danger, we see that a great majority of 57% of the Israeli public, and looking specifically at people who served the IDF, it's 64%, in fact, of people who used to serve or now serving in the army think that the military of the nation model is in danger. More than that, It is a principal ethos of the State of Israel. We see the most of the Israeli public think that continuing the existing policy about conscription of Haredi men is threatening security of Israel and might lead to damage to the security of Israel. Here too, when looking at these questions from people who did serve in the IDF, we see even a greater datum. 68% of the people think that, and when a basic fundamental ethos and the security and this, perception is being threatened, then this is supposed to motivate us to understand that things must change. Another point we need to notice is the question of how many people believe that something might be done, could be done. How many people believe that something will be changed at the end of the day, whether because of legislation or discussions we're holding here. And what we see is that all in all, 2/3 of the public do not believe that there will be any significant change. I want you to pay attention because it's quite interesting to see that here Haredi and secular people agree with each other. When we look at the demographical cuts, we see that there is the same rate of people who thinks that there's no change. It's more than 70%. It's more than 74% of people think that there's not going to be any change. If one thing that secular people and Haredi people agree upon is that we are not going to see any change coming about. And the last point we want to talk about, because we will be hearing about it later today, there is an increase of support for women being combined in battle. Almost 70% of the Israeli public thinks that women should be able to join all battling combat battalions. And this datum, though, is lower for younger people, and only 55% of the people who answered, who were between 18 and 24, who are the ages of people now serving in the IDF. Thank you very much.